Thanks, Larry. One thing that we're going to visit with about today is this whole idea of third-party beef audits. A lot of us, it's nothing new that we haven't seen in the past. It's not a new concept, but it's something that's probably more recently directed and came to our, I guess, to the forefront of feedlot production around the state and around the nation. And so I just wanted to kind of give you a brief overview of some of the background that we're seeing with this particular scenario in the state of Nebraska. First off, we really need to understand what's the difference between an audit and an assessment. When you look at those definitions, that audit is simply an official examination that verifies something. And in this particular instance, they're verifying that we are producing the product that we say we are. Now, an assessment is just a little bit different than that, and it's a review or evaluation of what we do. There's no examination, there's no official outside person doing that. A lot of times that's a self-assessment. So we got to go back and we got to say, well, first off, they're asking us to do an audit. And a lot of times we think about an audit as we're trying to hide something. And they're trying to find that. Maybe it's that skeleton in our closet or something that we swept under the rug. But in our industry, I don't believe we're doing that. We're doing the right things for the right reasons because we're passionate about producing a product called beef, right? All the people in this room, I know, are out there every day doing what they do because they have a passion for what they do. And so we have to think about that as how can we be better at doing or telling our consumers better information. These audits are simply, they want to know what we do on a daily basis for as far as a standard operating procedure of each instance that we perform in the feed yard or even in a cow-calf operation. They want to know we have the documentation that says we do it, but as we kind of go down through this list, we also talk about they want to observe us doing these things or have somebody observe us to say, yeah, they're doing the things as far as what's scientifically and done research on. We have the best management practices out there, and we're utilizing those for the best care and welfare for those animals. So that's kind of what we see in these audits as you talk to the folks that are asking us to do these. This is exactly where we're at. The next question simply is, why a third-party audit? Well, if you really want to know, our consumers are demanding information. Earlier you hear a lot of people talk about millennials and how they get their information. All of us in this room can actually recall something that we've seen that has shown an observation of a poor management procedure that's been done in the livestock industry, whether it be a pork industry, poultry industry, or even in our beef industry, right? How many times do our consumers see the good things that we do? Probably not very often. We don't tell our story very well, and that's why we have more consumers out there right now that want to know how and where their beef is raised. And so when we ask that question, we go back to the 2011 National Beef Quality Audit. That was one of the top priorities for our consumers. They want to know. They want to know that they have a wholesome, safe product that's the best quality we can produce. So with that in mind, that's why the processors and the packers are asking for it. They want to have a verified and credible source of cattle coming into their operations, into their plants. They want to have that. And the only way they can get that is they're asking a third party to come in and verify that you're doing what you say you are. One thing that we see is BQA is a voluntary program. We don't have assessments that we come out and say, the only way you get certified is we guarantee that you're doing it. Voluntarily, we're saying that we are doing it. Our consumers are asking us to take that next step. For us as producers, why should we want it? We have one thing, product integrity. All of us talk about we produce the best quality of beef we can in the state of Nebraska. We are the leaders in beef production. We are the epicenter of beef production. It's our product out there on the line. And we want to have them have the best eating satisfaction each and every time, which goes back to we have to have the integrity in that product to guarantee the promise that we've made to them. And so this shouldn't be anything that scares us, because we're doing exactly what we say we're doing. We just don't document it very well or tell that story. And again, it comes back to best management practices that we offer on those feed yards in those operations. So we got to continually do what we do. Who are these individuals out there that are asking? And I think we know two of these that came out within the last couple months, like say third-party audits or something that they are going to implement. On the consumer side, or that retail side, McDonald's coming out approximately 2-3 weeks ago saying by 2016 they're going to, all their hamburger, all their meat is going to be in sustainable operations. Now, I can't tell you what sustainable is defined as, but they've said by 2016 they're going to do that. Well, the only way they can guarantee that is some type of a third-party audit. It's going to be interesting to see how that relates as we move forward. But McDonald's has also asked the same thing. We want to know where that meat's coming from. We want to go through, have our sources go through a third-party audit. Probably the one that's most familiar with us in the front of our minds right now is Tyson. Tyson came out and they said they were implementing the third-party audit or their farm check program to do audits on animal well-being and care in feedlots of all of their source cattle. Now, our industry hasn't seen this before. They're asking for all their suppliers to go through a third-party audit or be subject to a third-party audit. So when we think about that, we have to be prepared for that. Right now, we're in a short market, right? We've heard about that in the last few weeks, is we don't have the cattle supplies. So again, this has kind of slowed the process down. I do know JBS and Cargill have also talked about third-party audits. They've developed some documentation, but they haven't come out and said they're going to do it yet. They're still working on theirs, and that process has slowed a little bit. And again, as far as us as producers, we're looking at to actually give it the product integrity we continually say we have. What are some of the key elements that they're going to be looking for in these third-party audits? It's pretty simple. I think there's some documentation out there, and I'll talk about some more here in just a little bit. The feedlot assessment or the cow-calf assessment, stocker assessments that the NCBA has put together for BQA, they're out there. But all the elements are somewhat uniform across all the board of all the people asking for these third-party audits. The guidelines and the benchmarks have changed a little bit depending on the audit. And so when we look at that, the elements that they're really going to be looking at is employee training. Not just the people that are processing the cattle, but the whole yard. Even those individuals that are in the mill, those individuals that are running the feed trucks, they have to be there. They have to be trained and understand the purpose behind what we're doing. And so employee training and the documentation of that is going to be a key. They're also going to be looking for BQA as one of their sources of training, but they're also going to make us go through maybe viewing a video that they produce and put out there for us. They're also going to come there on a site assessment. They're going to come right to your yard. All of us in here that have been in this business long enough have probably started to put together some of these standard operating procedures. And you have a book of those somewhere, hopefully. You might have done some self-assessments, and that's what this piece is that I'll talk about in a little bit. Do that self-assessment to see where we're at, where we need to improve, and where we need to educate ourselves. So when you look at those, we have to have those in the process. As you talk to the auditors that are going to be doing some of these, their key pieces are right there. Those two especially, the documentation. Standard operating procedures, having some self-assessments. They're going to look at those. The next thing is those daily observations. observations, animal observations, and animal handling observations. I'm going to lump those three together. They want to see the actual daily process of that feed yard. They're going to ask for a time that they're going to see cattle either loaded or unloaded. They're going to observe a pen of cattle being processed. That's what they want. They want to see that our handling processes are there that we say we're going to do. Like driving aids. How many times do we use a driving aid? Everybody's going, what's a driving aid? Okay. Electric prod. How many times are we using that to move those cattle through those facilities? They're going to count those. They're going to count how many cattle fall coming out of the chute. They're going to count those. Now, there's some differences there because some of us, when we look at the assessment, we're saying we need less than 10% on driving aids. Well, some of these audits are saying they'll allow you to go up to 25%. So there's some differences here. We're trying to get it more uniform, but until we can get everybody on the same page, around the same table, it's difficult to get everybody to say, this is the one audit that everybody will do. As far as facilities, that's a bit another one. How much space is enough space? Well, it kind of depends on, I'm from western Nebraska. How much space we have for calves in our feed yards out there is going to be different than what you have here. There's going to be differences because of environment. There's going to be differences because of location. Where's that feed yard built? What kind of ground is it built upon? Soil textures. It's just going to simply change. So therefore, on that one, they've kind of made it more lenient, and it's pretty easy for most feed yards to fit into that time or that pen space if they follow the rule of having enough dry space for those animals to lay down, and they're not wading through mud on a constant basis over halfway through the cannon bone. I think most of us can relate to that. Now, in a muddy scenario, if we get enough heat and melt all the snow that's here, I guarantee you they're going to be walking through mud for a few days in some yards. It's just a process. But on the average normal day, that's what they want to observe. So those things are pretty straightforward. Now, the next one and the last one are two that people kind of view a little differently. But euthanasia, having that SOP down, written down, that process of euthanasia is a key. That's been one stumbling block. A lot of us know what we do in that process and how we do it. We just don't have it written down somewhere. And they want to see that. The last one, and it's not acceptable by any means, is any acts of animal abuse. This one, there's been no observations of animal abuse in any of the pilot audits or any of the audits they've done in the other two industries, poultry or pork. But they're also giving you some advantage to know when they're going to be there. Okay? And so that's one piece that I haven't talked about is they're going to do these, they're going to notify you, at least give you 2 weeks advance notice to set up a date when they're going to be there. Because there are certain processes they want to see. So we should be ahead of the game. We should know what's going on. When they come, if we hand them that 3-ring binder of standard operating procedures, as an auditor, I'm saying these guys got everything in order. It's going to be easier to walk through this process with these auditors. I can tell you right now on the Tyson side, IMI Global is who they have contracted with to do their third-party audits. And they're working with that group now and trying to finalize some of the preparedness for that. So you have some advantages. Now, eventually down the road with these audits, instead of they're going to have some way they're going to incorporate an unannounced audit because they want to know that it's a daily practice that you do these things, not just when you're notified when they're going to be there. And so at some point down the road, they'll probably implement that. But when we talk about all of this, what's in the audit, it comes down to this. Can we fail the audit? This is something my English teacher always told me. It's a no but. If you have a no but, it kind of sounds like it should be a yes. But no, not physically, we can't fail the audit, but at some point, if there's something in that audit, you are going to have to reevaluate and make a correction to get it to meet the guidelines and the benchmarks they have set. They basically got a 3-slot scoring system. Acceptable, needs improvement, or unacceptable. Hopefully we'd all have acceptable. But needs improvement. It's going to require you to take some action, to review that process or review what's happening there. Right now, on their pilot audits that they've done, this is information coming from them. Usually, in every one of those categories, the percent range is anywhere from 10 to 16% in each one of those categories has a needs improvement. Okay? They want you to take action. They're going to review it with you. They want the education process to happen. And then the unacceptable, that means you have to make the change now. You have to make the change now. And so that's one of those deals, they're going to warn you, you have to do it, and we're going to give you so much time, and it better be changed when we get back, type of scenario. Now, when you look at that, that one's been a lot lower. They've gone from 0 to about 6% that have fallen in that category. When we talk about what has fallen into the needs improvement or unacceptable category, the biggest thing that makes that happen is documentation. We don't have the documentation in place and the record-keeping system in place for these SOPs to meet their benchmark. So that's why I say that documentation is a big piece of what they're asking for. That's why we talk about these assessments. The NCBA has these available, and actually it's a BQA document. You can find them at the national website at bqa.org. There's one for all 3 sectors that we kind of deal with, the stockers, the cow-calf, as well as the feed yard. You actually have a copy of the assessment piece in your proceedings, but this is a 51-page document, okay? And inside this manual, there are examples of standard operating procedures. They're there for us. Basically, it's one of those deals, fill in the blank, okay, type of scenarios. We have things to help us prepare for these audits, and the assessment is one of the biggest tools we have. And when you look through that, and you can look through yours if you'd like, there's a list in there of just protocols, best management practices on simple standard operating procedures. If they're there, you can check them off. You know what's there. You know what they're going to ask you up front. And even in the third-party audits, they're going to give you the checklist up front as well. And so these shouldn't be something that are going to be something new that comes to you that day. You have that checklist, and you have some tools available for you. I also talked a little bit about the mud scores. We talked about that already. Mud scores versus actual pin size. Again, how much dry area do they have to lay in? And that's another one that we talked about quite a bit. Kind of wrap things up, it comes down to this. Are you prepared? Follow these assessments. They're going to be pretty close to what you're going to see. I do know some things that might not be in the assessment that'll be on the audits is like a mobility score. We're still trying to get our hands around that. We'd like to get everybody, again, on the same page. That way we have an idea. We don't have a mobility score, but I know Farm Check will. Some of them are asking transporters to also go through a BQA training to transport cattle into these processing plants. So it's something that this is evolving. The other thing is have your documentation. Every auditor I've talked to this point, they said, that's the first thing. Have the documentation and have it ready. If you're fumbling through trying to find the documentation when they get there, that's where you're probably not as prepared. They're going to ask you to improve that system. Feed records. Train the employees, document that you trained them, and follow best management practices. They're all out there. We all know what they are. We talked about them all day at the Feedlot roundtables. Do the practices that have the research and the science backing, because that's the key. We do our job and we do it right. Let's get it on paper. Let's tell our consumers that we're doing it right. When you look at these, again, at BQA, we're not endorsing these and we're not the driving force behind them. We just want to help you be prepared for this process. These are going to be something of the norm as we move forward, and that's why we want to get everybody kind of prepared for that. There will also be a trickle-down theory as well. As we get going along, the logistics of doing cow-calf and stockers is a little more challenging when you start talking to some of our packers and some of our retailers, because we have a lot more of those. The logistics is just a little bit more challenging, but we're going to need these cows to follow those processes all the way through in those practices. And so we just want to kind of remind you of that. Just some more about my information. I'm happy to really visit with you about some assessment things as far as where can we find the SOPs. We have some resources out there where you can make these SOPs pretty easy. Like I said, type in the names of who's responsible, how you do it, and print it out. Get it in your books and in your record-keeping system. And so you can contact me. I am out at Scotts Bluff. I do travel the state quite often, and so if I'm in the area, I'm more than happy to visit with you and sit down and talk to you about the assessments. You have my contact information, so please feel free to ask me anything about those, and I'll be happy to visit with you. Yes.